We are live from St. Louis, Missouri, the home of the Blues, the Cardinals, the Rams, the Arch, and some damn good barbecue. EA Sports, in conjunction with Sheerdog, present undercard coverage of Strikeforce Henderson versus Babalu as part of the Sheerdog MMA Fighter Exchange. Good evening once again, everyone. Adam Geller, cage side, joined by Jordan Breen at the Scott Trade Center. 3 exciting bouts featuring fighters in the Sheerdog MMA Fighter Exchange. And Jordan, we talked a little bit about this program in sort of our pre-show, but to everyone who's joining in at our regularly scheduled time, 4 fighters paired up with more experienced pros, traveling the world and training with the very, very best.
Yes, and Pat Cummins was a perfect kind of guy for that, because not only did he have a high-level background being a well-respected wrestler, he's someone who's a very quick learner, and on top of that is someone who, being paired with Jason Miller, I think they made a perfect kind of binary star traveling to Brazil. They got to go to all the top gyms in Rio. A guy who definitely benefited from his time traveling to Nova União, Brazilian top team, and other top gyms in Rio de Janeiro.
Mike England, our referee, and we're off in round number 1. Terrell Blackjack Brown in the yellow trunks, and in the black is Pat Cummins, who was part of that Sheerdog MMA Fighter Exchange program. And why Blackjack Terrell Brown? Why that nickname? Because he is a blackjack dealer, and he's dealing out some pretty bad hands early on to Pat Cummins, who keeps trying for that take. Not very damaging at all.
He's starting to get some punching room now. Earlier on, it's the kind of situation where elbows on the ground would have been beneficial in Strikeforce. Obviously, they're prohibited, but he's starting to get some punching room here.
Of course, wrestlers tremendous at positioning, but what he's been working on as he's starting to throw those heavy rights and now throws in a left and trying to follow up on the ground. Brown, with a hold of his leg, will try to get up and try to take the wrestler down, but he is just getting pounded here.
This is just about over. Terrell Brown, who wasn't in great shape, is just getting beaten to the head and body. This is about to be a successful pro debut for Pat Cummins.
Yes, Pat Cummins hits 21 on the blackjack dealer, Terrell Brown, who goes bust. The victory in round number 1 by TKO. Bonus contest.
It is a rather exciting night. A lot of people, myself included, have been critical of Strikeforce in the past for not putting on strong undercards, for using perhaps novice, inexperienced local talent. This is a very good blend of experienced guys, strong prospects, even guys with 0-0 records who have serious blue chipper status, and being blessed with a bonus fight now between Cortez Coleman and Lucas Lopez, with 2 guys who are, pretty skilled middleweights as well.
We're about to have, as we mentioned, some bonus middleweight action between Cortez Coleman and Lucas Lopez. And you mentioned, despite that criticism, if you do look on some of the undercards, some stars that have moved up. Tyron Woodley had his Strikeforce debut in the undercard in 2009 in this very building. Some other stars have started to move up, which is all the more reason to tune into Sheerdog to watch some of these undercard fights that we'll be getting to. Now, Lucas Lopez is a name that surfaced a little over a week.
Reaching for his takedowns here and just getting killed with uppercuts inside. If Coleman's going to turn it into a hockey fight, it looks like he's going to get himself a knockout. Lopez isn't protecting himself at all from the collar tie.
Well, we are in a hockey arena. The Scott Trade Center of the St. Louis Blues play their home games.
It's absolutely fitting, I think. A little Garth Butcher tribute here. A little Tony Twist.
I was going to say Tony Twist. No jerseys here. You expect someone to pull someone over someone's head and land a couple of short uppercuts.
Fitting that Cortez Coleman would be in the blue with the slightly gold trim as well.
Trying for the takedown was Lopez, but he gets reversed.
Or Coleman, unless he can, flip him over and take top, I think he's probably going to look to stand up here. Oh, in fact, going for the guillotine.
Yeah, and he's trying to get into guard, which will help that guillotine.
He's great finding the legs here. I don't think Lopez thinks he's in. Oh.
As we've seen with guillotines very often. Oh, and there's the tap. There is the tap. A little bit of an upset, and Lopez seemed to almost dispute it as they were getting up, but Coleman is your winner with a guillotine.
And Coleman gives him the NFL fine throat slash and a gun.
Well, we see the entrance here for Max Payne Martinyuk, and I like the music. Hawkins back to the days of the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal.
I have to say, in general, I've enjoyed the music tonight. It's nice that Strikeforce, is allowing these guys to use real songs. Pat Cummins, as we mentioned, great taste in music. He came out to Architecture in Helsinki. Probably one of the few times you're ever going to see that in MMA. It really lets some of the guys' personalities shine through, and I think for something like this, especially on an undercard, totally appropriate.
26 years old is Martinyuk, 6 foot tall. this being a lightweight fight. He weighed in at 154.5 pounds. You mentioned the boxing background. And again, in talking with that program, he was paired up with Gegard Mousasi, and he was able to train with Fedor at the M1 Global USA Training Center in California. Not only was he training as part of that, apparently he was the translator as well, helping others train.
Yeah, Fedor Emelianenko gave a closed seminar. He was there for Fedor's boot camp, a seminar that was open to the public, but beforehand, for about 2 hours, it was Max Martinyuk as well as Fernando Betega, who we'll see later. They were joined by their mentors, Gegard Mousasi and Ronaldo Jacare Souza, and they got a little intensive one-on-one from Fedor Emelianenko. The Last Emperor showed him the ins and outs of his clinch game, how he likes to ground and pound, what makes his ground and pound different. Very intensive one-on-one seminar stuff from Emelianenko. And it was Martinyuk who was fluent in Russian and English, so he was the conduit for all the discussion that went on that day.
As we now see the entrance of Justin Lawrence, a local product, Pacific, Missouri. And you talked a little bit about him, but I think that the two things that really stand out for him, number one, he is 20 years old. My question to you, Jordan Breen, is if you're 20 years old, you get a victory, how do you celebrate? You're not even legal. You can't have some of the champagne.
He's had a liberal chance to figure out how to celebrate in a non-alcoholic way. He had his first amateur fight a month after he turned 17 and won. He's undefeated as an amateur, has a lot of amateur kickboxing laurels. He's not just a striker, though. He is very good on the ground. He likely enjoys a considerable advantage over Martinyuk on the ground. Max Martinyuk, most of his background is in striking. However, Justin Lawrence, in spite of all the kickboxing, in his amateur MMA fights, has shown a considerable ground game. He can wrestle, he can slam guys on the floor, he moves well on top. If there's a big disparity in talent here, it's definitely on the ground. Justin Lawrence, the far superior grappler.
And the other thing that stands out about Lawrence, when I spoke to him, very, very grounded and very, very humble. And for someone who's 20 years old and has a lot of hype, as you said, undefeated as an amateur, 6-0. He was a 6-time national champion kickboxer, 3-time Pan American champion kickboxer. He just recently signed with Black House, and if you don't know Black House, let me just name you Anderson Silva and the Nogueira brothers, Jose Aldo, Javier Feijão, so many different names associated with Black House, Lyoto Machida. That's pretty impressive.
Justin Lawrence keeps walking here. He can walk himself right into full mount.
And full mount is achieved indeed, and it looks like he's going for an arm triangle.
And this might be over.
He's got it locked in. Those are punches. Those are not taps, but I feel like the tap could be very, very close if he can move his body just a little more.
This isn't super deep. He doesn't have it deep under the jaw, and he's a little high here, but he can still choke him out, especially against someone who's less experienced than him.
He just has to continue moving to the right side of our screen. And again, as we've seen sometimes in chokes, it's very easy to gas yourself out, to gas your arms out if you don't finish right away.
Lawrence now basing down. Oh, he goes back up.
Going back to belly. Going on belly and then back to the arm triangle.
That's probably the better chance that Justin Lawrence has here. He didn't have it. There's no sense burning your arms out and really trying to crush that choke if it's not underneath the jaw. I thought he had the right idea trying to go back to knee on belly and get back to full mount. Even still here, sets up inside control, looking to get back to mount. He can try to set something else up from there. He's clearly the better fighter on the ground.
The cage, but you are able to push off of it. We see the defense being put up by Martinyuk on the bottom to prevent full mount. So driving a knee into the ribs. You may not feel those right away, but by round 3, if it makes it that long, he'll definitely be feeling it as well as tomorrow morning.
Yeah, knees to the body are devastating. In general, ground and pound to the body, extremely underrated. Going back through the pantheon of MMA, you think of Quentin Rampage Jackson's first fight against Chuck Liddell. Couldn't elbow to the head in pride, but you could certainly elbow to the body. And he made arguably the best light heavyweight ever sort of wheeze and moan in pain.
Somewhat appropriate as we reach the end of round number 1. He was going for the ribs, the local product. They're kind of known for ribs here.
How very fitting.
Of course, I'm a big fan of boxing, especially on Showtime, but one of the things that's so easy to understand about mixed martial arts, of course, less weight classes. It's easier to know who the champion is, the challenger is, who the former champion is, and in that regard, I think it's easier to follow.
Well, fortunately for you, Showtime putting it all together with the Bantamweight tournament forthcoming.
Yeah, that'll be next week starting in Tacoma, Washington. And, of course, that Super 6 is still going on. But we hope to see some knockouts here in St. Louis, and I don't mean the ring card girls.
It's often sometimes...
Saw that left hook kind of just pawing out there. Kind of looping like the arch here in St. Louis. And now a kick to the midsection. Again, didn't land, but it's more like a jab would be used to keep the opponent at bay, keep him off balance, and then I think eventually you'll see a takedown from Justin Lawrence.
Denny's a very good athlete, very
poised.
I mean, fighters aren't dumb. It's easy to tell if you're in there with a guy and your level is higher than his. He clearly doesn't feel threatened by Max Martinyuk on the feet, and you already saw in round one. If he has to go to the ground, he has the ability to potentially tap him there. There's no reason for Justin Lawrence not to be relaxed. That's not to say to be overconfident, but there's
big right hand and following up.
Absolutely no reason for him to be worried by Max Martinyuk. He's just a better fighter.
Left hook followed by a right, and Martinyuk taking it well, but you kind of get the feeling that he may not be long for this fight, that Justin Lawrence is just biding his time. He knows it's going to come. Doesn't want to walk into anything, and he's lighting him up like a menorah. This one could be over soon.
Game's a really good athlete.
Third and final round of our second of 3 fights here on Sheerdog. Thank you so much for joining us, Adam Geller and Jordan Breen, cage side, here in St. Louis, Missouri, at the Scott Trade Center, the undercard of Henderson versus Babalu 2, Electric Boogaloo. And a big punch, kick on the ground. That's an illegal. That was, in essence, a soccer kick, and referee John McCarthy stepping in.
That's absolutely an illegal soccer kick. Obviously, if you hit a guy in the shoulder, that's perfectly acceptable. It looked like he clipped him in the side of the head. That's as legal as it gets. This isn't pride. This isn't valetudo. You can see a replay here.
That was a big left hook, and he just reared back. I don't think he was aiming for the shoulder. You'd have to think he's aiming for the head, regardless of what hit.
Regardless of where it hit, intent isn't what we judge. We judge where it actually lands. It did look like it grazed by his head and ended up hitting Max Martinyuk in the left shoulder.
John McCarthy, of course, one of the best referees in mixed martial arts, and it is a very tough call to see exactly where it lands. A friend of mine is a boxing referee in the Midwest. He knows what a difficult job this is, and this one is being waved off. Martinyuk, I guess, cannot continue. And is this going to be a disqualification that would get to Max Martinyuk, that would give him the victory?
This will depend on John McCarthy's ruling. If he rules that this was an intentional kick to a downed opponent, it's going to be a disqualification victory for Max Martinyuk.
You'd hate to see that if the youngster, 20 years old, just got carried away and will get a disqualification loss. Looks like they're going to go to the scorecards.
John McCarthy's apparently ruling that he meant to kick him. He didn't mean to kick him in the head, however, so it looks like that this fight will be scored. This round will be scored in partial, and this will be a technical decision after 2 rounds and change.
And sometimes the referee will take a point away and then go to the scorecards. I did not see that gesture. Now, we would tend to think that Justin Lawrence will get the victory here on a technical decision.
On a night where guys get to choose unique and personalized entrance tracks, that guys are actually coming real with it. We've had some architecture from Helsinki, some throwback Prodigy. It's a good night on the Strikeforce music selection, if nothing else.
You know, the more you talk about the songs, the more likely you're going to have to pay a rights fee. I just want you to know that.
That's fine. I'll suck it up. I think it's worth it. These guys deserve to be personalized in that kind of way. There's nothing worse than seeing a guy in a sport like MMA where part of what's thrilling is seeing the kind of intriguing personalities you get. You get very unique personalities in MMA that you don't get oftentimes in stick and ball sports. And what better way to express that than what a guy would choose to walk out to in a moment of hype, in a moment of clarity before he goes in to fight someone in the cage.
Do you imagine seeing, let's say, Mirko Krokop walk into the cage and not hearing Wild Boys?
Only if I was here in the Pride theme the first time he walked in the UFC. Though on one New Year's Eve, he did use some bizarre Croatian hip-hop song, and I believe he went out and lost to Mark Hunt immediately after. See the kind of role that music plays?
I can actually remember a recent fight with Roger Huerta where he was walking to the cage enjoying his music, and all of a sudden an emotional promo piece went up on the big screen about his very troubled past, and he says that got into his head a little bit, took him out of his rhythm, and caused him to lose his fight. But let's focus on Fernando Bettiga. 6'1", 170 and a quarter pounds from Curitiba, Brazil, 30 years old. He was announced with a record of 7-4, but they should maybe check Sheerdog. Sheerdog's Phillips. He also part of the fighter exchange with fellow AKA fighter Luke Rockhold. And again, it was very interesting that they're from AKA, American Kickboxing Academy, which is making a name for itself in San Jose with the recent victories of Cain Velasquez and, of course, the upcoming title shot for Josh Koscheck. He trains with a lot of those fighters, but it was Fernando Bettiga, as part of traveling around the world and seeing what different camps had to offer, went to AKA. You think they gave him any bad advice?
They were fairly receptive to Bettiga. I was there with him. The big thing that was important there, he spent 2 days there. They got through sparring. The big thing was the Tuesday wrestling practice, led by two-time Olympian and Strikeforce heavyweight Daniel Cormier. Being able to see Cormier and Velasquez going back and forth in the clinch all day long, seeing really high-level wrestlers going with one another in such a hard fashion in the wrestling department. Bettiga, he admitted, the weakest part of my game, I'm Brazilian, there's not a big wrestling culture, my takedowns aren't great, my takedown defense could be better. It's something that he realized he needed to step up in his game after seeing what was going on at AKA's wrestling practice one of those fateful Tuesdays.
What do you like about these pro wrestling style entrances where they announce the guy as they're coming to the cage and then they get right to it? I kind of like it. Keeps things moving, and these guys are moving very early in round one, swinging wildly, both men, and then they head up against the cage.
Bettiga's performance.
Somewhat of a tough round to score because not very much damage being done on top.
Bettiga has a really good guillotine he's looking for here. If he has one finishing move, this is definitely it. He gets it standing, he gets it from the guard, which is fairly unusual. He's got a very good guillotine. It'll be interesting to see if he can finish it from full guard. Not a lot of guys can.
It looks like there's a little bit of space there under the arm by the neck.
It takes a serious guy with a nice guillotine, nice sense for it to be able to sit up in guard and lock up the head and still be able to finish it.
Guys, what does Phillips need to do to get out of this at this point? Drive him up against the cage?
It'd be good if he could cross-face and put Bettiga on the mat and peel his head out that way, control the elbow a bit. Breaking his grip would be fine as well. He's getting out here. This isn't super deep. So there wasn't any real necessity for him to really strain himself too much. But it's something he has to be wary of. That if Bettiga does have a great ace in the sleeve, it is his guillotine choke, whether it's standing on the mat and scrambling.
Bettiga with a lot of feints. You mentioned training with Babalu. Babalu in the main event against Dan Henderson. Strikeforce on Showtime coming up at 10 o'clock Eastern Time. So everyone who has joined us here on Sheerdog, the great action continues here with Strikeforce. Hope that you will all tune in. Not too late to order up Showtime. Crowd getting a little bit restless here.
That shower of booze really got the hand speed.
So what do you think each fighter is being told? I mean, do you think they're getting an honest assessment? Hey, this is even, got to go out there, got to win it, or be safe, be conservative?
I think that there's no question in my mind that the AKA corner are being direct and forthright with Wayne Phillips. This is a fighter who repeatedly has been told in the gym, you have to eat better, you have to train better, you have to conduct yourself like a real professional athlete if you want to be something more than a weekend warrior. His trainers at AKA have never pulled punches with him. I'm sure that Bob Cook and Luke Rockhold are giving a very honest and genuine assessment of what's happening in the cage right now.
Until you got to the athlete part, it kind of sounded like what I get at
the choking arm's position right now.
Third and final round, halfway through, 2.5 minutes to go in what we think is an even fight.
Phillips looks like he's going to get out of this. This doesn't appear to be too stressful at this point in time. Unless he jams his head under Bettiga's armpit at this point in time, he should be fairly safe.
And we saw, those arm punches from Bettiga, so his arms are probably already tired. If he gasses out from the guillotine, it is an opportunity for Phillips, who is now on top in half guard, to maybe do some damage, trying to pass to side control.
That's a really boom or bust move for Fernando Bettiga there. That is the difficulty of having a guillotine. If you're not someone who's a great wrestler and who can escape from the bottom quickly, if you go for a guillotine in that situation, you're putting all your eggs in one basket. You're saying, this is my chance to win the fight. I'm going for it. He may have blown it for himself. A competitive fight on the feet up until this point in the round. Wayne Phillips ride this out on top. It's feasible he'll win a 29-28 decision, all because of that choice to go for the guillotine from Bettiga.
And you never know with the judges, are they more experienced at judging boxing matches and they just look at the striking and they don't realize that a near submission should, in my opinion, be judged just like a near knockout would.
The problem is
We await the decision, and of course we await Strikeforce Henderson versus Babalu 2. On Showtime, Mauro Ranallo, Pat Miletich, Frank Shamrock, and Heidi Androl will bring you all the action.
Al Wichers and Jackson Harper saw it for Betega.
Perhaps it was that guillotine, but Betega wins